Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran down to the marketplace, and cried out, 'Where is God? I seek God!' And the atheists who do not believe in God laughed at him. 'Where is God? Has he gotten lost? Is he on vacation?' They laughed, and then the madman jumped right into the midst of them, right in the center, and he pierced them with his eyes, saying, 'Where is God? I will tell you, we have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. Do you not hear the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do you not smell the divine corpse rotting away? God's decomposed too, you know. God is dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest in all the world has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood from us? What waters are there to cleanse ourselves with? Is not the greatness of the deed too great for us? Must we not ourselves become gods in order just to be worthy of it? There has never been a greater deed than killing God, and whoever is born after us will belong to a greater history than all history before us. At this, the madman fell silent and looked again at his listeners. And they too were silent and stared at him in astonishment. At last, he threw his lantern on the ground and said, "Perhaps I've come too early. My time is not yet." These words were written by Friedrich Nietzsche, pronounced Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche. Repeat after me. Friedrich Nietzsche.
Friedrich Nietzsche.
You got to do the dance. Come on. Besides having the best mustache of all time, Nietzsche was a German philosopher who said, "God is dead." Surveying history, Nietzsche said, "It's no longer a mystery, God is dead." We've been watching this path play out the last few weeks. First, secularism took God out of the public sphere. Then naturalism took God out of science. Then Karl Marx took God out of politics and economics. Then Darwin took God out of creation last week. Where has God gone? Nowhere, that's where. God is dead. And we killed him. The modern world killed him. Now, obviously, Nietzsche doesn't mean that we actually killed God. We didn't take a knife and shank God. No, what Nietzsche means is that God never really existed in the first place. And modern society is just now realizing it. Nietzsche was an atheist. He didn't believe in God. And for Nietzsche, the death of God didn't just mean we can sleep in on Sundays. No, for Nietzsche, the death of God meant the death of morality and meaning. Now, what does that even mean? The death of morality. Well, let me ask you a question. Is morality subjective or objective? Some of you are like, what? Take ice cream, for example. What is the best ice cream flavor? Just yell out the best ice cream flavor.
Chocolate brownie fudge.
Now, yeah, you all allowed. Everyone has a different favorite ice cream flavor. Some say chocolate, some say mint, some say I'm lactose intolerant, give me soy. What is the best ice cream is a subjective thing. Some people like one flavor, other people like another. There's no objectively best ice cream flavor. It changes. It evolves from person to person. It's just a matter of personal taste. It's subjective. But what about morality? Is morality subjective or objective? Have you ever heard someone say honesty is the best policy? Is that statement about honesty an objective or a subjective statement? Some people in some cultures would say, well, you shouldn't be super blunt and honest about everything because that can hurt people. You can break the unity. It's good to, calm it down a little and be more polite and respectful. But other cultures would probably emphasize more, no, you just need to tell the truth in everything, even if it hurts people's feelings, truth over unity. And so, our view of honesty changes from culture to culture. It's not necessarily objectively right or wrong, it's just a matter of cultural preference and personal taste. Some people would say honesty is subjective. But what about, say, slavery? Is slavery objectively right or wrong? Or is it just a subjective matter of taste? Is stealing someone from their homeland, putting them in chains, and forcing them to do manual labor objectively wrong? I mean, in Western culture today, and around the world, most people would say, yeah, slavery really is wrong. But yet just 300 years ago, slavery was everywhere. And the majority of Western culture was totally fine with it. One culture says one thing, another time in culture says something else. Does that mean that slavery is not objectively right or wrong, but is simply a matter of taste? Is it subjective? Is slavery like picking the best ice cream flavor? And most of us would say, it's not. Slavery is not a subjective thing. Slavery is somehow different from subjective things. Slavery is objectively wrong. And if you don't agree with that, you are wrong. Slavery is objectively wrong. And even if all other humans in our culture thought it was okay, it would still be wrong. Which means that if objective morality exists, it must come from something higher than humanity. It would be possible for all humans to be saying one thing, but still be wrong. Because objective morality is not based on what humans think. In ancient Rome, it was culturally acceptable to have sex with little boys. It was considered a status and wealth symbol if you could afford to have a sex slave by your side. Most of the humans in that world were okay with that. But it was still wrong. Because objective morality is not based on humans and what humans think is right. Objective morality, if it exists, must be higher than humanity, higher than society, higher than what people decide is right. Objective morality has to be such that even if all humans on earth agreed about something, they could still be wrong about it. Even if a culture decided it was okay to rape little boys, they would still be wrong. Even though the majority of the planet at one time thought slavery was okay, they would still be wrong. Because objective morality, if it exists, must be higher than society and humanity. And that is where God comes in. God, at least traditionally, is the higher source of objective morality. God has been the higher being we turned to as the objective source of what is wrong and right. From complex cases like slavery, all the way down to how you should treat your mother. God doesn't invent what is wrong or right. Rather, he is himself the very standard of goodness. God is love, the Bible says. God is goodness. And so, God is the golden standard. God is the absolute, objective reference point in relation to which something is either right or wrong. God is the ruler by which all moral measurements are made. How do you know something is 40 inches or 100 feet wide? Because we have a ruler, a tape measure, an objective standard of measurement we can use. Two humans may both look at a wall and make contradictory judgments about how big it is, but the ruler provides the objective measurement, the objective standard. In the same way, it's only the absolute ruler of God that provides the objective measurement for what is right and wrong. But if God is dead, then what is good is not defined objectively from above, but subjectively from below. If God does not exist, then God is not the one making the rules. We are. If God is not the source of morality, then we are the source of morality. Morality is a social construct, something we invented. You might invent one morality, and I could invent another. And since there is no higher objective standard that makes me right and you wrong, then morality is just subjective. It's just a matter of personal taste, like ice cream. People try and make you feel like you should follow their rules, play their game, obey their morality, but it's just them versus you. Their rules versus your rules, neither of you is objectively right. It's like when you play a board game and you don't have a sheet of paper that has the rules on it. So you make up your own rules. All the players get into an argument about how to play the game. One person says, well, we should start by pass and go. Another says, well, you should start by giving me $100, and then we'll go around clockwise. And no one is technically right or wrong because you're just making up the rules as you go along. So in the end, the person who yells the loudest usually gets to make the rules. And if God does not exist, that is all that morality and society is. If the loudest and biggest part of society decide slavery is okay, then it's okay because there is no higher standard than humanity. There are no higher rules. We make up the rules ourselves. Now, this doesn't mean you have to believe in God to be good. Not at all. I know a lot of atheists that are great people, and I know a lot of Christians who are horrible people, many of whom are in the audience today. There are priests molesting little boys. And there are atheists out there changing the world for the better. You don't have to believe in God to be good. In the same way that you don't have to believe in gravity in order to stay on the ground. You don't have to believe in God in order to be good. But if God does not exist, there is no such thing as goodness. Atheists as people can be good, but atheism as a worldview has no objective basis for good. So I'm not saying you need to read the Bible to figure out what is right and what is wrong. Rather, I am saying that if God doesn't exist in the first place, there is no such thing as right or wrong. Now, this is one of those ideas that you have to hear like over and over and over again until it finally starts to make sense, because you think it's saying one thing, but it's saying something else. So let me explain it again from a different angle by telling two different versions, two different accounts of where morality comes from. The religious version and the atheist version. Here is the religious account of morality. In the beginning, morality already existed. Morality is eternal. It always exists, ingrained in the nature of God. God is love. God is goodness. Morality exists before the world even begins, before time itself. Morality is absolute, eternal, grounded in an eternal God who is the very definition of goodness. Then God creates the world. Through creationism or theistic evolution or whatever, God brings about humanity, and then he takes these eternal, objective morals and implants them within our hearts. Romans 2 says, God's law is written on our hearts. And though humans disagree about what exactly is right and what is wrong, at the end of the day, right and wrong really do exist somewhere underneath it all. We aren't necessarily able to prove which morality is the right one, but at least, because God exists, there is an objective morality of some kind, and it's possible if we live our lives searching for it, we may find it. Though some part of our moralities may be cultural or subjective, and we may disagree on some of the details, underneath it all, there is something objective about morality, something that is higher and based in the nature of God. Love is not just a social construct that we invented. Love is something that is objectively good, a piece of eternity that has been placed in our hearts. But now, let's imagine an atheistic world where God does not exist, and how we got morality in that story. In the beginning, there was nothing. There was no morality or meaning or matter. Then the universe banged into existence, and slowly, over billions of years, inanimate matter evolved into single-celled organisms. There is no such thing as morality. Bacteria are not moral or immoral. If bacteria wipe something out, it's not evil, it's just being itself. Morality doesn't exist yet. And then over millions and millions of more years, the origin of all the species we see today occurs. And eventually, you get a species like a monkey. Well, it's not a monkey. It's an ancestor of monkeys. But for simplicity, I'm just going to call it a monkey. So if you actually know science, just bear with me. And these monkey-like species, they ate their own poop, and they humped trees, and when they got starving, they would eat their own children. But then something changed. The monkeys that were nicer and stuck together in a pack, they tended to live longer because they had a network of protection. They worked together as a group. But the monkeys who were more naturally independent and just took care of themselves, they didn't stick with the pack. They didn't get the same protection from the others, and so they died more often. They had less babies, and their genes became less dominant in the gene pool of their species. And so natural selection, we talked about it last week, natural selection begins to ingrain working together and being nice into the DNA of our species. Because if you're not nice, you die. And your genes die with you. And over millions of years, these monkeys evolve into human beings. And this sense of working together evolves into what we call morality. And so now we have this inner instinct within us to be nice. Just like spiders have an inner instinct that guides them to make webs. Morality is not an absolute, objective, unchanging, eternal thing. It was just a survival technique that was useful for the reproduction of our species. And so over time, it got so deeply ingrained within us that now we're deluded into thinking it somehow actually means something. But it doesn't. Love and romance are not higher values. They're just survival mechanisms. It's safer in pairs. Being nice and taking care of others isn't objectively good. It just happened to be useful in the gene pool at this particular moment in time. This is the atheist story of how we got morality. Our species adapted to its circumstances, and that led to these deep feelings, which is what we call morality. But if our circumstances had been different, we would have evolved differently. What if we had had less predators hunting us, and so the species didn't need to stick together to survive? Then we wouldn't have evolved to care about others, and our morality would be totally different. For example, there is a species of wasp which lays its eggs inside the body of its prey. And then when the eggs hatch, they eat it alive from the inside out. What if we had evolved in such a way that was more like that? What if eating people from the inside out had evolved to become an okay part of our morality? A few small shifts in evolution, and all the things we think are good and moral would be radically different. This is the very definition of subjective. In an atheistic world, morality is not objective, it's not absolute, it has no higher meaning. Morality just evolves to fit the environment, and if the environment changes, the morality changes with it. And since evolution is an ongoing process that's still happening today, whatever we do becomes moral, becomes part of the evolutionary process. People might not like my morality or how I live, but I'm just the next stage in evolution, baby. Deal with it. And if someone came to power and they killed off everyone who disagreed with them, then they could take control of natural selection, and within a few generations, they could evolve society into whatever they wanted it to be. And there'd be nothing objectively wrong with that, because without God, morality is just based on society and how we've evolved. So, if we evolve into a society of inequality and slavery, then that becomes the new definition of what is good. And in simplified form, that is what Nietzsche meant when he said, God is dead. God is dead, and so is morality. Nothing is good or evil. Nothing is wrong or right. Nothing matters. And this view became known as nihilism. Root word, nihil. Annihilation is to nihil something, to let nothing survive. Nihil means nothing. Nihil, nothing, nihilism. Nihilism says nothing matters. There is no God, no meaning, no objective morality, no right or wrong, nothing matters. You may think you're living a more meaningful life than a murderer, but there's nothing objectively different between you. And I can respect Nietzsche for his nihilism. I don't agree with it, but I have immense respect for people who are willing to follow their atheism to its logical conclusion, even if they don't like where they end up. Honestly, if I wasn't a Christian, I would probably be a nihilist, because I think it's one of the most honest and rational worldviews out there. It takes a lot of guts to deconstruct society and everything that gives us meaning in our daily lives and not look away in horror. But most people aren't willing to do that. Most people aren't as honest or as consistent as Nietzsche. See, the vast majority of atheists want to give up God, but keep pretending they live in a world of meaning and morality. They've killed God, but keep living as if he were still alive. And you can totally do that. You can go about your life pretending that right and wrong are still objective, real things. You can ignore Nietzsche and pretend that your life is objectively better than a murderer's. You can still be good in the illusory way you've been raised to be good and go about pretending that that still means something. But don't come and tell me that my faith is a delusion because you're the one living in the dreamland. You're the one who killed God but wants to keep living as if he were still alive. One of my favorite things, I love this when it happens, is when atheists say, I just can't believe in God because there is too much wrong with the world. Too much suffering, too much evil. But see, that assumes there's an objective standard of right and wrong in the first place, doesn't it? They are arguing that God doesn't exist because there's too much wrong in the world, but they can only appeal to objective notions of right and wrong if they assume God exists in the first place. Booyah! They don't usually realize what happened in the argument, but I'm sitting there very pleased with myself. If you believe God is dead, you've got to bite the bullet and admit that morality and meaning are dead as well. And on the one hand, that realization terrified Nietzsche. But on the other hand, he thought it was the most exciting thing that had ever happened in all of human history. Because it meant that humanity was finally free. We don't have to follow God's rules. We can make our own rules. There is no meaning in the universe. We get to make our own meaning. The quest for absolute freedom that began with the French Revolution ends in nihilism. And Nietzsche believed that only a few people, only a few special people would be strong enough to face this meaninglessness head on. Only a few would be strong enough to admit that morality was a lie and to then invent their own morality. Only a few would be powerful enough to kill God and then make themselves gods. And Nietzsche called these people Übermensch, or in English, Superman. Now this is before the American Superman, so don't imagine Nietzsche flying around in tights and catching blondes. Though if you would like to, I'm sure it's quite an enjoyable vision. Superman with a mustache. It's wonderful. These men in Nietzsche's world are super, not because of their physical strength. They can't fly or anything like that. They're super because they're strong enough to face the harsh fact that the world has no meaning. And instead of crying about it, they decide to create their own meaning, and that is what makes them super. The supermen are strong enough to kill God and make themselves God. Only a few would be strong enough to create their own morality. And after Nietzsche's death, this idea gets twisted and reworked by another German guy, Adolf Hitler. That's good old Adolf on the left. But who is that on the right? He's got a big mustache. Who is that? Is it, oh, it's Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche. This is Hitler visiting the Nietzsche Museum. In fact, this is one of only many times that Hitler visited the Nietzsche Museum. In fact, the Nazis declared Nietzsche one of the official philosophers of the Nazi Party. Now, Nietzsche would not himself have been a Nazi. In fact, Nietzsche hated fascism and he hated anti-Semitism. Most of the time, the Nazis are misquoting Nietzsche, twisting his words, taking them out of context. However, if Nietzsche's underlying worldview is correct, then is anything Hitler did actually wrong? In a nihilistic world, can we say that genocide is objectively wrong? Now, from within your own moral system, you might look at the Nazis and think they were bad, but what makes your morality more objectively right than Hitler's? Wouldn't Hitler just be a Superman creating his own morality? In fact, the Nazis often called themselves Übermensch. They saw themselves as Nietzsche's Supermen. They believed they were the next step in evolution. That is why they committed genocide, because they were trying to control natural selection, trying to kill off everyone who didn't fit into the new Nazi morality so humanity could evolve into the Aryan ideal. And if God is dead, and evolution is the only basis for morality, then what they did wasn't technically wrong, because they were just the next step in evolution. And what if they had succeeded? What if Hitler had taken over the world and killed off everyone who disagreed with him? That's what he was planning to do, and he was actually pretty close. If a few things went differently, we might all be speaking German right now. And Nazism would be the new morality of the world, with nothing higher to say it was wrong. And so, you are left with a final closing choice. This is where it starts to get a little practical. As you leave here today and go about your lives, you have to wrestle with and decide for yourself if God is dead or not. If God is dead, can we still say that the Holocaust or slavery or rape are objectively wrong? And that question is horrifying. But it also means you get to make your own rules. And that is exciting. You can continue playing by the rules you were raised with and pretend they actually mean something, or you can be the Superman. You can break all the old rules and invent your own. Just don't get you caught, because, all these other unenlightened people still believe in right and wrong, so they might put you in prison. But if you believe Nietzsche was wrong, God is not dead, then you can live and act within a radically different world. A world where there is good and evil, where there is a cosmic struggle between the two, and we are all caught up in it. A world where your daily decisions, good or bad, actually have some higher meaning. And God is inviting you into that journey. Now, none of this proves that God exists. Just because I want the world to be full of meaning and morality doesn't mean it is. God doesn't just exist because I want him to. None of what I said proves that God is real, but it does, however, reveal how much is at stake. The question of God is not a little question. It's not just about whether there is a bearded man in the clouds who's watching you all the time, even when you poop. It's a much bigger question. The question of God is the biggest question of all. And Nietzsche understood that before anyone else. Nietzsche wrote in different places, "God is dead. There can be no doubt that morality will slowly die. This will play out over the next 2 centuries in Europe." And it is scary how right Nietzsche was. Surveying history, Nietzsche said, it's no longer a mystery, God is dead. Nietzsche was a prophet ushering in the death of God. But luckily, our God has resurrected before. Perhaps he can do it again.